Hi, I'm Jen Davies. I'm the Manager of Career Development Services at the Academic Advising and Career Center. And it's my pleasure to welcome parents and family members to Get Started. So, if I had you in front of me, I would ask you to give me a show of hands and tell me who thinks that their student probably has aspirations to go on to further education, maybe law school, med school, a master's of something. Your student just is really academic and you see them going on even beyond their bachelor degree. And I would also ask you, who thinks their student would really like to earn a paycheck? I like paychecks, so I totally approve of that. So who's thinking their student will probably want to go on and pursue employment once their bachelor is finished? What I'd like to share with you is no matter which group here you think your student's going to fall into, it's okay if they change their mind because the preparation is the same. So for graduate and professional schools, obviously your student's going to need high grades. Not a surprise, right? Medical school as high as they can accomplish. Law school, pretty much the same. For employers, most employers that we talk to anyway aren't really all that interested in your students' grades. There are a few exceptions like the finance area, but really they're not super interested in your students' grades except as they are indicators of your students' ability to get stuff done, right? Because in the workplace, your employer needs you to get stuff done. And usually if you can get stuff done, the grades are usually pretty good, right? So that's how employers would look at grades. Whoops. With regard to further education and experience, so most graduate and professional programs not only want a student to have a good solid GPA, they also want them to have experience. I have met students with 4.0 GPAs, that's a perfect GPA, who did not get into medical school. And they didn't get into medical school because they couldn't show that they were well-rounded, thoughtful human beings. Medical school can teach them all the medicine and the biology and the chemistry and all that stuff that they need, but they can't teach them how to be a person, right? A good person at that. So the experience piece is really, really important for further education and obviously for employment. Employers are looking for people who have more than just a basic level of skill. If they can get someone, they're looking for specific skills sometimes that sometimes can only be got by having a part-time job or by working on campus or by being an executive in a club. U of T Scarborough has so many clubs where your students can really learn leadership and teamwork and all kinds of really great skills by engaging in different experiences on campus. And employers like to see those. For further education, your student will very, very likely have an interview. Med school interviews are legendary. They are called the multiple mini interview, where your student might be asked to travel from room to room and meet 6 or 8 different people throughout the course of a morning. But even for a very academic, research-oriented master's, typically the fit between the student and the supervisor is very important. So there's typically an interview there as well. And of course, for employment, I tell students that if an employer that you've applied to doesn't want to talk to you before they offer you the job, there's something weird going on, and they should probably come and talk to us because that would be quite strange. In terms of further education, your student will typically have to write what's called a personal statement. It's kind of like a cover letter, but it's usually about 2 pages long, sometimes as long as 3. But just like a cover letter, it explains how the student is a good fit for that program, a good fit for that field of work, if that program sort of acts as admission to a particular field of work, and articulates sort of a student's motivations. Why do I want to do this kind of work? And of course, experience helps a student tell stories that are going to be useful there. And for further education, typically a student will be asked to provide a CV as well. Now in Canada, in this context, the context of further education, CV means curriculum vitae, which in Latin can translate roughly to your life story. So in this case, a CV might be 3, 4, 5 pages long if a student has done a lot of things. And that's okay in the academic context because a student will emphasize papers they've written and presentations they gave in classes and things that employers aren't usually interested in. Employers, of course, want a cover letter, which is a 1-page letter explaining why they're a fit, and a resume. Now, of course, resume comes from a French verb, résumer, which means summarize or summary, right? So a resume is a summary, 1 or 2 pages maximum, just the good stuff, right? In terms of courses, sometimes further education asks for specific courses. I've already given the example, maybe stats, maybe a program requires statistics as a specific course and maybe a specific grade. Whereas employers, they don't usually ask for specific courses, but they might have a particular field of education that they think is interesting. So for example, they might say, you know, this job is a good fit, since we have AJ here, this job is probably a good fit for someone with a political science or a sociology background. For further education, of course, it's very common that your student would be asked to engage in some kind of admissions testing. I'm sure your student has heard of the MCAT for medical school. For law school, it's the LSAT. For many kinds of academic graduate studies, it's the GRE, which is the graduate record exam. Those are all very common and will require some preparation for your student to step into. I've noticed that in employment, employers seem to be leaning towards skills testing. I think skills testing creates a sense of equity, which I think is a really good thing. And so your students should be prepared to be asked by an employer to engage in some kind of skills testing when they go for an interview as well. And then finally, references. So for pursuing further education, a student will need reference letters, typically at least one from a professor, sometimes two. Again, it depends on the kind of further education being pursued. And sometimes a reference from a boss or someone who knows their work ethic, you know, in a non-academic context, or who knows them as a human, as I was saying, you know, around medical school. That might be required as well. Every school has different expectations. I can't say exactly what would have to be in there, but typically no one would write a reference for someone if they didn't know them, right? So something for your student to start thinking about as they enter second or third year would be to start really, you know, getting to know professors, you know, visiting their office hours, sitting in the front of the class, putting their hand up, you know, really finding a job, finding a volunteer job or a paid job on campus, working with a professor in a lab. Those things are really important because they involve building a relationship with the professor, so that when the student asks them, would you be a reference for me, the professor knows who they are. Likewise for employment, for the same reasons. Although employers usually want to call someone, they don't usually want letters. And they want someone to call really just to verify, of course, that the student really is as awesome as it sounds like they are. And that they're not just a great actor. But again, someone is more likely to agree to be a reference if the student has a relationship with them. And those things are going to take time. Getting experience takes time. Building relationships takes time. And so your student might take this year off. They might give themselves this year just to get oriented to the academics. But certainly by this time next year, I do hope that your student is starting to think about, again, that getting involved, that part-time job, that volunteering in the community or on campus for again, these purposes like getting experience and developing references. And there are so many ways at the University of Toronto Scarborough to get involved. There are student government opportunities, there are volunteer opportunities both on and off campus. There are part-time jobs near campus, work-study jobs, which I promised I would talk about, which are often research opportunities. Just so you know, work-study jobs are part-time on campus, could be working with staff, could be working with faculty, and they can be no more than 15 hours per week, which is great. So students can definitely find ways to work their 15 hours of work around their 15, 18 hours of class, whatever it is, and then 15, 18 or more hours of study time, and earn themselves some money while they're also gaining experience, getting references, all those good things that I just talked about. Work study jobs, part-time jobs, volunteer work, research opportunities, all of these get posted in the Career and Co-Curricular Network, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. So please have your student look it up. And the work study jobs, which are the bulk of the part-time jobs on campus, just so you know, so you can poke your student so that they start looking, those always get posted around mid-August. So your students should start looking at those in mid-August, which means when should they update their resume? July, right? They should start updating their resume in July so it's ready in August. So again, so many opportunities for your student to get involved. We have 250 clubs at UTSC. And honestly, if your student doesn't see a club that's of interest to them, they can start one. We'd be happy to connect you with the staff member who oversees clubs, and he would be happy to help your student start one up.